Well, thank you, Dr. Deshmukh, for the kind introduction. If I had known that you would read it out completely, I would have sent the whole slide. Well, anyhow, thank you so much, madam, and thanks to the organizers also for giving me this opportunity to present on a topic which is partly well known, and partly I would say that yes, it requires a lot of inputs. And even after my talk, I think it will still remain a challenge for most of the physicians and diabetologists. So, the topic given to me is 2 months post CABG on metformin comes with heart failure. What next? So, Dr. Moses has already enlightened us on controversies with metformin. And two words here, metformin and heart failure, again, instill a controversy because initially in text, when we were taught in our undergraduate days, all failures, whether it is renal failure, whether it is heart failure, they were actually contraindications for metformin because metformin predisposes to lactic acidosis, and heart failure is also one of those end organ failures where you can have some component of renal dysfunction as well as heart failure, severe hypoxia precipitating metabolic lactic acidosis. So that I will just touch at the end. So we have 4 points here: diabetes on metformin. I take it that this patient is our diabetic because he's on metformin. That is not given to me, but yes, diabetes on metformin, having CAD to the extent that he has gone and undergone an post coronary artery bypass graft, and now he has presented with heart failure. So that is the scenario. And why actually heart failure is a problem? So this is a study in 2016, and if you see after CABG, coronary artery bypass grafting, if you see the preoperative heart failure patients, you find that this was a study done for 6 years, and death rates you can see. Those who do not have heart failure and had preserved ejection fraction, death rates were 13% over the 6 years. But those who had reduced ejection fraction, even without evidence of heart failure, it was 24.6%. And those who had heart failure as well as reduced ejection fraction, the mortality was of the tune of 42.9%. So that is the importance of heart failure. So if any patient otherwise also comes with heart failure, you see it is 24.6%. But in a patient who is diabetic, who has heart failure, has post CABG, the chances of mortality in the next 6 years could be very, very great. So that will remain a challenge. I'm not going to the details of the next part. But why actually heart failure should develop post CABG? We always expect that it should improve once we have an intervention. But yes, I would come to a couple of slides later. It could be a pre-existing heart failure because in diabetics, it could not be diagnosed. It may be missed. It may be asymptomatic. And that may become manifest after the stress of CABG. It could be because of graft failure, operative myocardial injury, pre-existing LV systolic dysfunction, reperfusion injury resulting in myocardial stunning as the causes of graft failure. And similarly, some causes it could be non-graft related heart failure. So this patient has presented 2 months later. There are chances that the patient may be having any of the non-graft related heart failures. And in general, there are aggressive management of hypertension and diabetes is important, which may not have been done. Smoking cessation, patient may revert back to his own lifestyle, which actually may be detrimental. Weight loss is important, and cardiac rehabilitation is also important. So these are some things which we have to pay attention when a patient post CABG presents to us with heart failure. There are some others also, but I will just come as we discuss in the course of illness, course of the talk. So there are a number of things which come in a diabetic with heart failure. So the problem could be myocardial infarction, or it may be a microvascular disease, not necessarily an atherosclerotic vascular disease. It may be a microvascular disease like diabetic cardiomyopathy, where we do not have overt atherosclerosis. So insulin resistance and hyperglycemia remain at the center point, including with or without endothelial dysfunction, and heart failure actually worsens insulin resistance as well as it can worsen hyperglycemia also. And this is what I was talking about. Subclinical myocardial damage occurs early, even before the diagnosis of diabetes. So this is what can actually result in heart failure, may have been covert and now becomes overt after CABG. And this may actually progress. So there may be a steady progression of the underlying disease despite CABG also. So this I have already alluded to. I will not go into details, but yes, we understand there could be a myocardial wall damage, which is a atherosclerotic event. And there could be inflammatory microvascular effects, which I already said, microvascular angina, we say, or microvascular disease or diabetic cardiomyopathy, which may not be atherosclerotic, cross atherosclerotic dependent. So again, this is important that LV dysfunction in diabetics can occur even in the absence of atherosclerosis. So again, a manifestation of microvascular disease is important for all of us to understand. And this I have already alluded to in the study. This is another study way back in 2004. So those who have diabetes without heart failure, the proportion surviving is much more as compared to those who are having incident heart failure. Similarly, those who have preserved ejection fraction, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, as was shown in that study also, they have better survival rates as compared to heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. So what can we offer to them? That was the question. What next? So once we understand the pathophysiology, we understand drugs for CAD is important. Drugs post CABG, there are some drugs which need to be given, and drugs for heart failure, which we will need to give. And obviously controlling the underlying diabetes is also important, which I will allude to later. So drugs for CAD, we have beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, statins, aspirin, and mineralocorticoids. We have post CABG. I will just come, because this patient is post CABG, I will just come to what the guidelines say for aspirin plus Spinase clopidogrel, ACE inhibitor, ARBs, and statin high efficacy. For heart failure, we need to understand that mineralocorticoids and ARNI have an additional role to play. Apart from device therapy, which I will not be discussing in this talk, otherwise it will just go on. So post CABG antiplatelets, aspirin has to be given 100% unless until the patient is intolerant or allergic. So dose is 81 to 325 milligram per daily, class 1 evidence. And after CABG, because this patient is post CABG, for 1 year, we need to give dual antiplatelet drugs. So we need to give aspirin as well as clopidogrel. If the patient before CABG had an ACS, then it is preferred to give prasugrel or ticagrelor as compared to clopidogrel, but aspirin still has to be given. Just in case this patient is being given only antiplatelet therapy, then to prevent aspirin resistance, we should give a higher dose of aspirin. So rather than on the lower side of the range of 81 to 325 milligram per day daily, we should give 325 milligram daily. That preferably aspirin plus clopidogrel for 1 year. And after 1 year, you can stop clopidogrel, but not aspirin. So aspirin has to be given lifelong in these patients. Statins after CABG, you have to give a high intensity statin. So you can give either atorvastatin 40 to 80 milligram and rosuvastatin 20 to 40 milligram. And only those patients who are intolerant to high dose of high intensity statin, or those in whom we fear drug-drug interactions, like elderly populations, we should give a moderate intensity statin therapy. So a slightly lower dose. Now, beta blockers are controversial in diabetics, but yes, CABG patients, they should be prescribed beta blocker unless contraindicated for the categories where there has been a history of MI, for the categories where there has been LV, where there is LV dysfunction present, and for hypertension where alternative drugs are effective or not bringing the target to 130/85. So the agents that we have to use is bisoprolol, sustained release metoprolol succinate, or carvedilol, because they have proven benefit in CABG patients, for LV dysfunction and for heart failure also. And definitely ACE inhibitors in diabetics will remain the key as an antihypertensive therapy and for LV remodeling. Also, if there is evidence of nephropathy. Now coming to glucose lowering agents. So this is what there have been a number of trials. This is just one of the slides I have taken. And you can see acarbose, pioglitazone, sulfonylureas, metformin, sulfonylurea, thiazolidine, accord, insulin. They had 4 arms like this. And even with rosiglitazone, we all understand that there is no benefit to cardiovascular events with any of these drugs, as you can see in the forest plot. So even DEVOTE, where insulin glargine was tested with insulin degludec. So they are all not beneficial if you go by what and you can see the hazard ratios given there. While DPP-4 inhibitors were largely cardiovascular neutral. So that was what the glucose lowering drugs were. But when we talk of, apart from cardiovascular events, when we talk of heart failure, so you can see heart failure, actually most of the drugs, oral drugs as well as insulin, you can see they are actually increasing heart failure. Thiazolidine we understand, DREAM study, they were just withdrawn. DPP-4 inhibitors were also, we have some trials where they say that yes, it is increasing the impact of heart failure. So that is the problem with most of the drugs. With insulin, it may be the reason that people say it is because of insulin resistance. Evidence may or may not be so robust, but yes, we put patients on insulin when most of our drugs fail. So that's one of the reasons. GLP-1 by and large are considered neutral for heart failure. So I will talk about GLP-1 receptor agonists because they are one drugs which are beneficial to cardiovascular events, but not definitely against heart failure. So this patient is having ASCVD, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. It has an endpoint of ASCVD in CAD and has a CABG also. So this patient definitely would benefit with GLP-1 RA, the receptor agonist, but probably heart failure, we do not have evidence right now. So these are some recommendations of the standard societies that we have. We are actually believing in guidelines, and guidelines of all these agents. They say that those who have ASCVD, you should either use GLP-1 receptor agonists or SGLT2 inhibitors. Even the RSSDI, we are in the conference of RSSDI, and RSSDI 2017 statement also says those patients who have diabetes and established ASCVD, GLP-1 RAs and SGLT2 inhibitors should be maybe preferred, but now it is actually should be preferred. And they are suitable alternative for patients who are actually overweight or obese. So this is important. And if you go by this, the ACC expert consensus in 2018, the type 2 diabetes and established ASCVD, we should actually consider adding SGLT2 inhibitors when reducing heart failure hospitalization is the foremost priority. So this patient has heart failure. Definitely, we will not like to have admissions, and we will like to treat heart failure also. And as it was being discussed by Dr. Moses in the last lecture, now the primary prevention of ASCVD as well as heart failure, SGLT2 inhibitors are playing a role. So GLP-1 receptor agonists, they should be used for ASCVD, but right now for heart failure, we do not have data. See the European Society of Cardiology guidelines in the third row, 2019. First line treatment of T2DM in heart failure should include metformin and SGLT2 inhibitor. GLP-1 receptor agonist may be considered. So that is what the right now GLP-1 receptor agonists, we do not have convincing data against or for use in heart failure, but definitely yes, they can be used very nicely. We have a whole lot of studies, Pioneer, and we have the SUSTAIN studies with semaglutide and a whole lot of other studies which have benefit in atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, but right now not for heart failure, where actually SGLT2 inhibitors are the foremost agents that we actually need to use. So the pathophysiology, I will not go into this again, but there are a number of ways where SGLT2 inhibitors actually benefit the heart failure state. So we have improved cardiac bioenergetics, we have natriuresis, which they cause because of glycosuria also. We have reduction in interstitial edema, reducing the preload and afterload, improving the LV shear stress and improving LV function also. And also there are some ion exchange changes also which happen, and there is improvement in cardiorenal pathophysiology. Now we should understand that the cardiac are very intricately linked, and the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system is at the center point of actually harming or benefiting the cardiovascular system. It actually does try to benefit the system, but there is cascade which actually goes haywire, and that is why. So SGLT2 inhibitors actually act on all these aspects, and that is why probably with ACE inhibitors, after ACE inhibitors, but in a diabetic with heart failure, they are actually the agents which should be used for glucose lowering drug. And as Dr. Moses was saying, even without glucose lowering drug, now the primary prevention aspect is also being modulated for these agents. So across the spectrum, there are 3 drugs. So empagliflozin, you can see the major adverse cardiovascular events as well as hospitalization for heart failure, they are reduced. The CANVAS program, the canagliflozin, again, hospitalization for heart failure are reduced. And the dapagliflozin, the DECLARE TIMI study, we can see the hospitalization for heart failure as well as MACE are reduced. So these are just some of the studies which suggest, and you can see again in this, the all-cause deaths also are not significant in DECLARE TIMI, but hospitalization for heart failure, there is a significant benefit when we use dapagliflozin for reduction of heart failure states. So, and this is subgroup analysis where we can see the history of heart failure, whether or not it is present, the patients did benefit of diabetics. I will not talk about the amputations part, but yes, again, you can see this is for those patients who have a history of heart failure. You can see in diabetics, there is a definite benefit with canagliflozin and dapagliflozin. Those who do not have a history of heart failure, even in those patients, there is a reduced hospitalization for heart failure in patients who are receiving empagliflozin and dapagliflozin. So that is the advantage of using empagliflozin, canagliflozin, or dapagliflozin, any of the SGLT2 inhibitors in patients who have heart failure. So they definitely reduce hospitalization for heart failure. And when we actually have to consider, we consider a lot many things when we start any patient on any glucose lowering drug or even another drug. So effect on mortality outcomes, we have to weigh the micro and macrovascular complication, whether they are benefited or not. Contraindications, as this patient is having heart failure, maybe kidney dysfunction also. Risk of hypoglycemia, risk of weight gain, adverse events, age, efficacy, and costs. So, and all these things, if we go, we find that yes, SGLT2 inhibitors would be the right choice in this group, which need to be added, provided all other drugs, as I have said, have been already optimized. Now, this is another group of drugs which is important. Now, this ARNI drugs are also beneficial for these patients, and they are also quite efficacious. So, were this patient was not a diabetic, we do not have robust evidence right now for primary prevention, but yes, still you should consider adding an ARNI, replacing the ACE inhibitor or ARB with an ARNI group if we are having this patient who is post CABG and develops heart failure, especially if it is NYHA class 2 or 3 heart failure. Definitely this patient should be a candidate. So this is just a comparison of subgroup analysis for dapagliflozin. So you can see those patients who were receiving ARNI, they did benefit with heart failure, did benefit, and those who were not receiving ARNI, the benefit with dapagliflozin was equal. So you can see dapagliflozin or any gliflozin SGLT2 inhibitor has an equal efficacy as good as ARNI, ACE inhibitors or neprilysin inhibitors. So whenever we have to select an agent after metformin, right now the question was after metformin, I'm not talking of primary choice, but yes, add on to metformin. So this patient, even if this patient was not having CABG or ACVD or history of heart failure, the choice should have been SGLT2 inhibitors, because now the cost also is much less. But this patient has post CABG and has the status as well as history of heart failure. So definitely SGLT2 inhibitors will have to be added in this patient group. Well, I think that's last slide. Thank you. Thank you so much.